We're live. We're back. The trio are back. What did we decide we're going to call the band?
I don't know. I didn't see any reasonable suggestions, Laura, just silly ones.
Well, I thought you came up with most of them, though.
That's a statement in itself. Yeah, I don't think we have one. We're going to need to get one. We're going to need to get one for the tour, so we're going to have to get thinking.
Well, no, exactly. Well, maybe everybody can give us some thoughts. Maybe they can drop something in the chat as to what this trio should actually be called. Obviously, all polite things.
Yeah, keep it clean, people.
So from monotony to meaning. Now, I was really surprised that neither of you had heard of the term Boreout.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's a brilliant
one. Boreout. Not to be confused, if I can actually say the words, but but I was surprised neither of you'd heard the word. I was doing a bit of research.
It made a lot of sense to me, though, Laura. When I read it, I thought, because there are a lot of guys that come to me to work with me. That's exactly what they're going through. Is Boreout.
And I think that's the thing. Is so for those who haven't heard it, I did like a little Charlie chat search, and it said Boreout, a phenomenon characterized by chronic boredom and a lack of stimulation at work, has been gaining attention in recent years. Basically, because I asked how many people are experiencing it, and apparently 33% of people believe their work did not present any challenge. That's quite a figure. But I forget where I read it originally, but originally when I looked at the stats, it was probably a couple of years ago, and it was very much saying actually it's more dangerous than burnout, because the impact is far greater on our health, this sort of apathy. And I think it was because I was reading something else around languishing, which don't you just love that word, languish? I'm languishing. But I think, I don't know, as you say, Dan, it's that thing of this sort of apathy.
Yeah, it's like a stagnant way of being, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's me.
I don't know, Mark. What is it something that a lot of people that you speak to are experiencing, or?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting phrase, and it's just even the word boredom itself, to be bored. I can't remember the last time I was bored, but because I don't engage myself with things that bore me per se, but to be bored with work and bored, and this is, as Dan says, I would meet people and, they'll say they're stuck in a rut, or they'll say, I don't know what direction to go. And then actually one guy said to me recently, he said, I'm actually bored with life. That's an alarming statement. I'm just bored with life, So that means that everything that's going on is boring you, which tells you that there's no meaning and no purpose in what you're trying to do. I think it's a great word, because it's obviously something that builds over time, in the same kind of concept as burnout. So obviously it builds and it builds and it builds, and we don't realize it happening because, look, we have an idea or vision, or we kind of follow other people's idea. I should get a job in this, I should do this, or, maybe my father was an accountant, I become an accountant is kind of a direction that people will travel. And suddenly you're 10, 15 years, 20 years into this career, and it bores you. And you've got all these trappings because of it, and and maybe you've just kind of fallen into all these things and all these decisions. But if you think of the compound effect of being that bored on a daily basis for your life, wow, it's real lethargy, it's real apathy that really sets in, and it can be very hard to break back out of because you're just so lost in it all, I think.
No, and I think that's the thing is and how you say it's quite slow to get into, and how how do we notice that it's even happening? To get to that monumental point where you're going, I have no meaning in life, or life has no meaning. To your point, it's quite a statement to be making. What happened the last God knows how many years? There must have been something that triggered, or is it just that you just realised that you've been drifting?
Yeah, I think people forget that actually nothing has meaning in and of itself. Nothing. We give our lives meaning.
Yeah.
Right? And we get so focused on doing, and we have like these goals and these things we want to achieve. And like Mike was saying, we set out on a career or build a business, and we have these ideas of what we want to get. And it's normally about achieving and acquiring and stuff. And what we forget is that along the way, we need to give our life meaning. We need to choose what meaning we want to take from life, what emotional value we're looking to extract from our actions. And what happens, I think, with a lot of people, and it definitely happened to me, is I kind of was adrift because I'm off being disciplined and consistent, but I didn't know which way. I didn't know what road. I didn't know where I was headed, so I didn't know which road to take. So I'm disciplined and consistently moving away from who I genuinely am, is what I did for years. Because I didn't have an awareness of my core values, of who I genuinely was, of what I really wanted to get from life. What was my end game? What are the emotional values I'm wanting to end up with? Because I was talking to this guy recently. I think I mentioned him on a post I did to promote what we're doing tonight. And he turned up on a call with me a couple of weeks ago, the first time I spoke to him, like this. He just went, Dan, my life is meaningless. Now, this guy runs 3 businesses. He owns 3 houses. The one he lives in is a 6-bedroom detached house in a couple of acres of land. It has its own swimming pool. He takes his kids to Disney World just about every year. They've got everything they could ever want, everything. And I was just gobsmacked that here he is with his head in his hands telling me his life is meaningless. And all that had happened to him was he just got so focused on the doing and acquiring and achieving, the building the business. Money was everything for him. I said to him right at the top, what's your ultimate aim? Oh, Dan, I'd like to be a billionaire. Now, he took me up on the offer of a free coaching session, this guy. And I thought, this is brilliant, because I know just a slight tweak in his perspective here is going to change everything for him. So first of all, we found out what's it all about. If you become a billionaire, what are you doing with that money? Why do you want £1 billion? And then we started talking about the lifestyle he wanted and the emotional values he wants. He wants contentment. He wants satisfaction. He wants fulfillment, all those things, right? And you can get that from the everyday, mundane, eat, rinse, repeat parts of your life if you choose to give them meaning. So suddenly and I could see it in his body language, this revelation to him about, oh, right. So these businesses that I run, these thousands of people I employ, whose livelihoods I provide, the impact my business has, I can give all that meaning. Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, look at this environment I've created for my family. All I've ever wanted all my life, protect and provide for my family. That's what I've done. And then some, times a million. Oh, wow. And suddenly he had meaning in his life everywhere he looked. And all it was just a little tweak in his focus to remind him it's about who we're being. It's about the why. We talk about that a lot as coaches, but purpose. What values are we seeking to get from life? And when we're aware of that, everything becomes meaningful because we know why we're doing it.
No, I hear you. But I think I don't know. What do you think, Mark? Where's your
head? What you're saying there, Dan, is very interesting. I remember somebody talking about Conor McGregor, the shining light of how to behave in the modern world that Conor McGregor is. But when he getting the 100 million for Floyd Mayweather, and I remember hearing this guy talking about, well, look, so is that it? Has he won the final level? Is that all we're here for? So that we have enough money that we can just buy yachts and have a nice, amazing watch and have 10 or 20 houses, and that's all external, and it will never ever fill the hole that we have. A lovely conversation with a woman, Nicola Byrne, earlier today. I met her locally, and she works in a similar space to us, and she was talking about being in a company and helping them with their had a mission. But they had a mission, and outside that mission, they didn't have any values. So they didn't know where the meaning was coming from and what they were trying to achieve. And if I could tell a little joke on it, I remember back in my corporate days, and the team would come to me, and I had a few different teams, and the team would come to me. We'd be working intense all the time. It was always relentless. And they'd say, Mark, what is the point? Why are we doing this? And I'd say, guys, listen, it's really important that the work that we do makes somebody who's already very rich that little bit richer. That's meaning in this life, you know? And the thing is, I always used to tell that joke and say that joke to the guys. But eventually, for me, that wasn't doing it for me anymore, because I realized that this is not going to give me satisfaction. I can't do this for 20 more years because there's no value in it for me as a person. There was value in working and managing people. I enjoyed that aspect of it. I got meaning out of that. I got meaning out of the relationships I built and developed in the place. But I couldn't buy into the mission. I couldn't buy into the overall values. Didn't appeal to what I was. So if you find yourself in that space, then of course there's going to be a disconnect, because it's not going to align with who you are as a person. And now you can find your way in that place and find a way to align with who you are, and that can help and that can make things an awful lot easier. But if it's completely out of alignment with who you are, well, then you're always going to be heading for a crash. Always. It's always coming.
But I think there's a sort of another dimension as well, is that our life experiences change what has meaning to us as well. I think so many people assume, you know, Mark, you're talking about sort of the 20-year horizon kind of thing. And so many people sort of say, okay, well, I'm setting off on my career journey, and 20 years is, you know, I'm gonna, that's my meaning for 20 years kind of scenario. And don't expect that when life gives you experiences and you learn something, you know, anything, to be fair, you will take something away from that and say, I either like it or I don't like it. It's either something I want or I don't want. Whether you actually acknowledge that fully is, you know, up to you, I guess. But ultimately, that's what happens when you experience life. And therefore, what you started with as believing was going to give you meaning doesn't mean 20 years down the line that same thing will give you meaning. You know, I know from my own personal experiences that what gives me meaning now, courtesy of everything that's happened over the last 9 years, is very different from what it was like previously. You know, my meaning prior to all of that was going to work. And yeah, you know, Ryan's absolutely right. You know, to find true meaning, having gone through, you know, difficult experiences that are beyond our control, is, you know, very hard to find a level of meaning in that situation. But I think it's, you know, if I take you know, a similar situation, I think what I take meaning out of some tough situations that I've been through is more that actually I value life and individuals more as a result of it. So I will, in a situation where it's over having something versus someone, I will choose someone versus a thing, because through the experiences of my life, people have more meaning in my life because of that than having a car or house or whatever else. So I guess that's how they've robbed me. That's not to say it was the same back in my early 20s. You know, having the next stage in my career would have given me probably meaning back then, because that's where I was. But I think so often we don't recognize how our life experiences change us and change our meaning, and we assume that our meaning is almost static. And that's when we get to the apathy and the Boreout, etc.
Yeah, and it's all about values, Laura, isn't it? And that's the key. And our core values, our core intrinsic values, they change, and they are changed by experience. And we go through seasons in our life as well. There are times where we're in springtime and we're creating and alive and doing things, and there are times where we're in wintertime and it's time to be introspective and stop doing so much and hibernate a little bit from life. And life is horrendous. It is unfair. It is full of horrendous grief and loss, and it's horrible to be a human being sometimes. It really is. But those things do shape who we are, and they do shape our perspective, and they do give us a clue as to what really is meaningful and what isn't. as we go through life and the knocks and scrapes we take, and we get an expanded perspective from it, we get to know more about ourselves when we come through horrible and difficult experiences. And something that I used to find incredibly meaningful was sport. And I did it for a living because I did broadcast it for a living because I couldn't earn a living. I was never quite good enough. But because I spent so many years doing that, sport has very little meaning to me now, save probably my football team, there's so much history and tribalism and everything involved in that. Now I can choose now to step into sport and for it to have meaning, but it doesn't have the sort of meaning it used to in my life. It doesn't affect all my choices and my decisions and what I'm doing like it used to. It just did. Sport was everything, playing it, doing it, watching it, broadcasting it. And there came a point where I was a bit bored of it all. If I'm going to be completely honest, I was sported out, and who could ever think that you could get to that sort of place? But actually now I'm in a place where I can step back in and let sport give me meaning. And so I really enjoyed the FA Cup final at the weekend, and this made me really think about meaning, right? Because you've got two teams, both from the same city, both, this tremendous history and rivalry together. Currently, the blue side, City, is on top, and they're arguably the best club football team in the world. And against Manchester United, which is probably the biggest football club and biggest football name in the world. And they're on hard times, relatively speaking, for Man United at the moment. But I'm watching the two teams warm up, right? And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, Manchester City are already on the beach. They've won the league already this year. They've achieved everything. This game for them has very little meaning. I'm looking at Manchester United warming up. They're ready for war. They were intense. And I just thought to myself, they are going to win this football match because it means more to them. And that they chose that. It was shaped by circumstance, but it was a choice. And they did win the cup final.
But I think that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, it's a choice. But I guess the thing that's kind of going through my head, and I don't know whether you have any thoughts, Mark, but it's like what are the signs that we would notice that our life has no meaning? It's like, because I think sometimes we're so busy, caught up in Dan's word of doing, that actually, do we actually even notice that life hasn't got any meaning because we're just so busy?
Yeah. Look, I think we know when we sit with ourselves, Laura.
Yeah.
And when we sit down and we're quiet, and when we are consistently restless, or consistently it has to be the next thing, and I have to go on to the next thing. And I think it's quite indicative of my particular generation, right? So I'm only a whippersnapper of 46, I have to remember sometimes. But we went through an Ireland in the 2000s, in the first decade, that had money for the first time ever as a country. And I started working in 2000 or so, and suddenly there was money in the country, and the leader at the time, the Taoiseach at the time, said that we all partied. It was his excuse for how they made a balls of things, right? But we didn't quite party as much as they did. But we lived this life of just living like that for so long. And then suddenly all of us were getting married and having kids. And it was living this, again, intense life of small children, which is a very intense life for a number of years. And suddenly the amount of us come out of that and started doing marathons, or started doing triathlons, or started doing endurance things, because we had gotten addicted to the intensity in life. And that's what was giving our life meaning. We were working hard and playing hard all of the time, and we didn't know how to do anything else. And I think one of the reasons why we fall into that is because when we stop, we're like, what do I do now? What do I do now? I need to be doing something, because we don't know how to go in. We only know how to go out.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So I think when we stop, and it's like, the idea, it's amazing how many people I know of around my age who are beginning to quit drinking and stuff, because drinking was a thing that was filling holes all the time for so long. And they were like, does that give me any value? Does it? I'll go off it for a couple of months here and there. And I love being off it, but I do enjoy having the drink. But I don't do it because I need to fill a gap. I don't do it because I need a drink. I don't do it in that space. But when we're in that space, then that's how we know. When we're trying to fill a hole all the time, when we're trying to close something, and it can't be closed because it's not to be closed. We have to fill it out, fill it from this direction, and not fill it from this direction.
And I think that's a really good point, because it is about filling that hole. And I know, Dan, I think I put this in a comment to one of your posts, whether it was today or yesterday, where I said, you know, what about, you know, people not liking space in their lives and not liking to stop, you know, and what's the fear of having a space in their lives. And I think that's why we fill it, you know, we fill it with, you know, whether it's drinking, or we fill it with eating, or we fill it with doing, rather than actually sitting with that space. And I think, if I recall correctly, it's mainly fear. And I think you said, Dan, and I haven't gone back to you on this, but I think what you said was fear of what they would find there. But I'd actually argue it's fear of what they might not find, i.e. that there's nothing there.
Yeah, there's a bit of uncertainty in that, Laura, isn't there? And I mean, there's all kinds of different fear-based ways of looking at things that mean people don't want to sit still. They don't want to be with themselves, because let's face it, from being kids, we've all carried around guilt and shame and horrible emotions that we've not processed properly, or things we've blocked out of our minds that we haven't really gone back and looked at, and we've moved on. And because, you know, emotion doesn't go anywhere, it's energy. So if we don't process things properly at the time, and we go through some horrific traumatic things, and we move quickly on and brush some things under the carpet and don't face them because we don't want to, and all that stuff is lurking there for one day for us to have a dark night of the soul and look at and acknowledge. And it's an incredible process to go through, but it does fill you with fear. I know for years I did anything I could to avoid having to do that. Whatever I could find in you know, like Mark said, I went through that period of swimming stupid things and distances and pushing myself to the limits physically, because I could train for that. I could focus on it. It gave me meaning. And the last thing I wanted to do was stop and have a look at myself and deal with all my guilt and shame and all the things I've been carrying around with me since I was a child. It scared the living daylights out of me. I didn't want to look at that stuff.
And I think that's, you know, and that kind of almost plays to the opposite of Boreout. That's the burnout. Is that I think some of that burnout comes because, you know, we're not doing that. We're trying to fill a gap because we're trying to escape looking hard at what's going on in that space sometimes. But you know, then, you know, at some point you can't run away from yourself. I mean, no. You know, we all try.
I tried to swim away from myself.
Well, yeah, in your case, swimming. You know, Mark's cycling, perhaps.
It was a circular route, though, so I was always going to meet myself at the end. And I think it's a good analogy too, though, because it is a circular route. Like, you know, the sense of the bore-out or the burnout, or the sense of this lack of a meaning and a purpose, it's a circular route, and trying to fill it with everything, we eventually come back to ourselves. We all eventually come back to ourselves. Like, I remember sitting reading a lot of philosophy stuff, you know, in my very early 20s, and, you know, all of them would talk about this journey that you have to make, and it's the shortest journey. You know, the journey in is the shortest journey you have to make. And I'd be like, I don't get this. And I would have read around it for years and years and years. And you know what? And the reason why I would have said I don't get this is because I'm not ready for that journey. I'm not ready to go into that space, because I like the things that I'm doing to distract myself. You know, I'm enjoying doing what I'm doing to distract myself. And it's easier to do this. And, you know, the fear of change is like, because what if I can't do any of this stuff again? And when you were talking about there, Dan, it just reminded me of, I remember having a kid for the first time. I was chatting to a fella, and he said to me, your life is about to completely change. All the things you thought were wonderful and amazing are gone, but it's going to be replaced by something that turns out is even more amazing. I thought that was a very interesting line. And I think that can be applied to so much of life. When you go on this journey to discover what your real values are, discover what your purpose and meaning is for yourself, so you live in that space, the stuff that you thought had meaning was great, but it's going to have to go. But it's not, it's okay that it goes, because the stuff you replace with is the stuff that really matters to you. And then you feel good about what you've replaced it with, and you're no longer worried about what you're missing. Now you know what you've got. And that's the space we want to be in.
Yeah, and I think it is evolutionary as well. You know, you're constantly fine-tuning and you're constantly moving on and learning from it. I think, you know, it as you say, but it's recognizing that there's gold in the step forward, because I think so many try and hold on to what was before, that they don't make space for the new meaning coming in, the gold that's coming in. So in your example, Marwa, you're just about to have your child, and you've got this whole new experience stepping in. If you'd held on to all of that before, something would have broken, because there's no way you could have held all of that together, and you wouldn't have been able to embrace all the gold that is the new meaning, the evolved meaning, I guess. I think it's, I don't know whether it's, have I frozen? I don't know. My laptop might be playing out. Apologies if it is.
But I mean, yeah, it's a journey, isn't it? And life is a journey, and I've had a couple of existential crises in my life where I've gone, oh my God, what is it all for? And I think what the conclusion I've come to so far on my journey is it's all for evolving and growing. That's what it's for. That's what I feel like I'm here for, is to evolve and grow and define who I am in relation to what's happening to me with who I'm being in the moment. And if you're not evolving and growing, that's when you're stagnating. That's when life will cease to have meaning for you, because that's what the journey is, what generates the meaning. That's what it's all about. It's the one thing we can guarantee in life is change. That's one of the few things we can actually guarantee. So things are going to change and evolve. You are going to change and evolve. And I think when we're infected by this sort of scarcity and lack mindset in our culture, and I think that's what makes people cling. I think that's what makes people cling on and not want to change and evolve and grow, because they're worried about what they will leave behind. And I think that analogy, that story that Mark told there, is amazing, because you can put that across use that analogy for any area of your life. You are going to have to learn to let go. There are going to be things you're going to have to let go of. People, in your life, jobs, places you live, they're going to change. You're going to evolve. You're going to move on. So we have to all get much better at surrendering to the journey of our life and learning to let go of old versions of ourselves. It's something I've kind of had to do in the last 2 years. I've made some huge changes in my life. And the biggest struggle for me was letting go of the old version of me, the old mindset. And it still creeps back in. I still spot the patterns, and I'm much better at it now, at catching it stage one before I descend into victim. But it was a big evolution for me, and in a very quick time, all at the same time. So there is a bit of me grieving for that old version of me, and it keeps coming back, and I'm clean. And there's part of me still clinging onto it. And I'm a very self-aware person who gets lots of coaching and lots of help, but I'm still doing that. I'm still clinging on to that old version of me. There's something in me that just doesn't want to let it go.
There's a thing there that I just think is you kind of raised it there, Dan. And for all of us, there's that midlife crisis thing that we go through as well. Yeah. And I think a midlife crisis has a lot to do with purpose and meaning. I think it has a lot to do with the unwillingness to change. And hence, I can use the male example because, look, the popular concept is quite male in terms of, buying a fast car and, getting a wife 20 years younger, which is simply doubling down on the things that you have. Like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Instead of answering the question of why I'm missing something in life, it's just I double down. It's the fear of getting older. But like, getting older is a beautiful thing as we assimilate the things in our life that has happened, as you keep talking about, Laura, how we change as we grow. Like 20 years ago, I remember I was talking to this much older guy about something that had happened to me. And he said to me, it's a question that I have remembered to this day, and I use it now myself, and I try and answer it too with clients. And he said to me, what was the gift for you in that? And I said, I walked away from him. It was like, it took me 10 years to answer the question, to be honest with you. What was the gift for you in it? Like, I don't know. What gift? What are you talking about? You're mad. Like,
F off.
Because I couldn't see it. I couldn't see the hardship of what I had gone through as being anything of value, but how 10 years, when I began to realize it, I was like, well, how do I transform? How do I add meaning to that? How has that changed me so I can be a better version of myself in the world? was really what he was asking me in a very nice kind of way. And I wasn't ready for that. And when you ask someone that question and they're not ready to hear that question, that can be you get a lot of anger and you get a lot of, of course you do, because if we're not ready for it. But like, that's the root to it there. And the root to that sense of meaning is how we transform those things that have happened into us into mean something in our lives.
Yeah, no, that's the whole thing, isn't it? It's what means meaning to us, if that's the right way to describe it. But we have to make that interpretation for ourselves as to what makes that situation, that experience, meaningful to us. Because we could have all had exactly the same situation happen to us, but what we take from it is very, very different. I know that, and I talk about it often when I'm doing talks, is that when my husband died, I was very angry. People go, what angry that he died? And I'm like, no, I was angry because he'd left so much to the last minute, and just I had so much pressure. And actually what the anger was really about, when I got to the layers of it and the meaning it was to me, was the lack of communication, and the fact that he, because everything sped up so quickly, it was one minute it was fine, next minute it wasn't, and there I was. Angry was the trigger for me, but I realized the meaning in it was the communication, and that actually, to me, communication is really important, and that therefore, in taking that forward, I'm very conscious in relationships, in the way I work with people, that communication is really, really important, and that I make sure that I'm really clear with what I'm saying and the way I follow up and managing that expectation, because that whole experience, what I took away from it and the meaning it had to me, was that need for communication, open communication. Now, had that been yourselves, who knew? You might have interpreted that situation in a very different way and taken completely different meanings out of it. But that's the point, is we have to look at that situation and what it means for ourselves, in order to be able to take it forward. And I think that's so often the key. It's not somebody coming to us and say, well, it's going to have meaning for you in this way. Well, it won't, because that's them interpreting it through their perspective of the world.
Because we don't see the world as it is, Laura, do we? We see the world as we are. So, had all three of us gone through the same experience, we wouldn't have, actually, because we'd have all come at it from our own perspective, and therefore we'd have all seen different things. And what you've pointed out there is what I think is one of the keys to getting meaning in your life, is that bit of self-awareness. You were able to look at that, see the emotion it brought out to you, and that told you what you were valuing. Now, now this is why I got angry, because I value clear and honest communication, and I feel like I didn't get that. And so you took away from something that was horrendous for you to go through with this amazing thing. You were like, this is really important. So I need to now, in every interaction, every big decision I make, in every big relationship I have, I know that for me, it's clear to communicate openly and honestly. So then you know who you're being in the world. Then you know how to get meaning from your relationships. You know how to get meaning from your job and your career and everything else, because it's all one of the key and core values for you is open and honest communication. And it's that being able to have that bit of self-reflection, that look at what our feelings are telling us. They're like lights on your car dashboard. Your feelings, they're pointing you to something. They're not something to run away from. All feelings are welcome, whether they're positive or negative or not, because they've all got something to tell us about what we value. Life is a series of values conflicts, and we're making choices based on values that we are selecting that we want. And if we do that consciously, then life is meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm reminded of a story that I've probably never told. That when I was
no cats in the house, are there, Mark?
Pardon?
No
No
cats.
cats. No cats. No cats. No.
I know Carl was asking whether how our 100-year-old cat was getting on.
I was thinking about that cat and trying to find a meaning for that cat in that story. But I remember I was walking home from work, and I must have been 24, I think, 23 maybe, and I was lost. I remember I stopped in the middle of the street, and I turned left, and I walked into a barber's, and I completely shaved my hair off, completely. Just went in and just said, "Give me a zero all over," completely shaved my head. And I did it because I needed to do something drastic, because I wasn't happy and I was struggling. And it was my father was very ill with cancer at the time, and he just got another bad diagnosis. And so I was struggling emotionally, and I was 23-year-old male. I didn't know how to communicate. So I was struggling mentally because I was struggling emotionally and couldn't communicate this. And my communication was to shave my head completely. And no one recognized me at first because my head was a weird shape because I had no hair at all. And I did have to say it was really enjoyable to do that because it felt so weird. Like, and Dan, I'm not. I can understand that you're follically challenged there, Dan. So I'm very careful how I say this. But it was a choice, and we're talking about the need to choose and what we do.
If I do that now, Mark, it just squeaks.
Okay. But so for me, like, you know, when we're talking about the meaning thing, right? It's that we do drastic stuff because we're so lost. We do the wrong thing intensely because we're so lost. And nowadays, I'd like to hope that at that age nowadays, there's so much talk about, like, you find the answers and you can speak and talk about stuff that you might find a way to it. But for me, that was my communication, because I couldn't find meaning in where my life was at the moment. I couldn't find meaning in where I was at the time, and I think for me, you know, when I look around now, right, and we talk about, so where are we with meaning now in our lives? What has meaning in our lives now? And it's easy for me to say, look, I have kids, I have meaning. I work with people who have kids and they can't find meaning in it. And it's because their focus is on the wrong thing. They're looking externally. They're looking at the other things before they slow down and realize. And, you know, how many people come to the point where they realize that their kids had meaning, but they're looking around and their kids are now teenagers and want nothing to do with them anymore. And, you know, so you've missed the meaning that you would have developed in that would have let you grow on in that space. And I think I kind of try and find meaning in as much as possible. Like, I do an awful lot of stuff with family because that matters to me. Like, simple act of having a cup of tea and reading a book that I do in the morning has meaning for me because it's something that I enjoy and something that fills me up. But it fills me up from the inside and it doesn't fill me up from the outside. And that matters to me. And it's those little things. So now I don't have to do as many drastic things to try and communicate and find a sense of meaning. But it is that thing. And I think it's learning to read how people are communicating that lack of meaning. And as Ryan pointed out there about, you know, for meaning, struggling to find it, like, that's how we can see it. People are communicating to us all the time. Everything we do is a form of communication. And an awful lot of that communication is that I can't find meaning.
I think that you hit the nail on the head there, Mark. It is that whole, our behavior is almost just like it's that inner angst, that inner disconnect with what really matters to us, but we can't vocalize it. But this is the best way that we can vocalize it, and it's not always constructive. And I talk about being disconnected from ourselves often with clients, and invariably it can quite often be a behavior or an emotion that is the trigger sign that says we've become disconnected from that thing that matters to us and that gives us meaning. And that is the first sign. So it could be that we're drinking too much, that, you know, we're gambling, we are, you know, feeling stressed, we're experiencing Boreout. It could be those things. It might not be, you know, something obvious like, you know, somebody has died and therefore, you know, that's triggered this whole, you know, uprooting of what gives life meaning. You know, some of those things are quite, I don't know, I'm going to say quite obvious, but they are more obvious than being able to put your finger on it and go, that stress is definitely associated with a lack of meaning in my life. That's not normally where people make that instant connection. It's only when they start kind of going, okay, well, you know, where is this stress coming from? And, you know, maybe it is because you haven't got enough money coming in, but why is the money important? And then you get to the crux of it all, and it is about meaning. It is about what matters most to somebody in that very moment. And I think that's the key thing, isn't it?
Yeah, because life's a struggle, Laura, isn't it? You know, it's a constant challenge, and we can choose to see that as an adventure, but it's not always easy to do that because life grinds you down, man. You know, we've all been there. We've all been kicked in the nuts when we didn't see it coming, and that happens. And you know, if you've not focusing on the meaning and the emotional values you're extracting from life, and you're busy focusing on the doing and the inquiring, and then when life does kick you in the balls, you really are going to get knocked for six because you've got nothing to anchor, you've got nothing to center you. So you know, and you can guarantee life is going to be a bastard to you at some point. So and particularly I think when you know, Mark alluded to midlife, there are a few kind of transitions we go through, aren't there, in life? You know, when we go from 20s to 30s, that's a transition. Suddenly our focus changes, our priorities change. You know, 30s to 40s, 40s to 50s. These are all transitions where different things are now going to become important to us because we're in a different season in our life. And we need awareness of that. We must have awareness of that. We must give ourselves time to pause, time to reflect, time to find meaning in our life. You know, if we're really aware of what we value, like you were saying earlier there, Laura, about the open, honest communication. Therefore, the smallest interactions you can have with people can be imbued with the most wonderful joy and meaning. Because you and I could just have a 20-minute chat on a Zoom call, and it's lovely and open and honest, and you know, we're both vulnerable and there, and you can walk away from that just going, oh my God, that was amazing, because it was open and honest and wonderful community. You could bump into someone in a cafe and have a 5-minute chat with them and take away lovely meaning from that small interaction, because you're incredibly aware of what you value. And if we're aware of what we value, we can find meaning in even the most mundane things. I used to hate doing washing up, right? I got an aversion from it from being a child. One of my best days ever was when I bought a dishwasher for the first time in my life. Now, we still have a dishwasher, but there's only me and Julie now in the house. So sometimes we have to wash a few pots because the dishwasher's not full. I now find joy in washing the pots. I enjoy the feeling of the warmth of water on my hands. I enjoy the process of doing it, and I enjoy seeing the clean things that I've put up. And that's just a choice to do that, right? And one of the things that I find valuable in my life is freedom. So I understand that doing this right now is going to give me the freedom now to have the time to go and do, rather than let it all build up and become a pain in the ass and something we don't want to look at and then a big job. Just that 5 minutes of enjoying washing the pots, that's going to bring me some freedom. And because I know that's valuable to me, I get joy from washing the pots. That has meaning to me.
Yeah. So we know where we're sending our pots to then, you know, when we're not interested in doing our washing up then. We're sending them up to Scotland.
You also mentioned Julian. There's no proof that she still exists, Dan, but that's a different story. But that is being very mindful of what you're doing and being mindful in the moment and mindful of the situation, you know. And we spend our lives distracted, and you know, distracted is another place. We can't get meaning in distraction. We only get meaning in the moment, and only in the moment. And I love the word joy as opposed to happy, like the search for happiness. Like the American Constitution has that line in it about the pursuit of happiness, you know, which I think is one of the most dangerous lines in anything. Happiness isn't something to be pursued. Like it's this image of you chasing down the road after the happiness is running away from you.
And that's how we all live our lives, Mark, isn't it?
Yeah, but
we're all chasing this elusive happiness.
Yeah, like what we want is the joy that brings in the single moments. Like, and you know, when we talk about meaning too, there's another word that hasn't come up for it, but it's so important. I think it's purpose. And purpose is and so many of us we spend our time trying to find a purpose, and we look at what other people are doing. Maybe that's my purpose. Maybe that's my purpose. But I believe that once we get in touch with our values and we find our strengths and we start working in spaces that honor our values and our strengths, we find our purpose sitting there waiting for us at the end of that, because that's where we'll find it. Like our purpose is we're not going to watch what somebody else does and go and suddenly jump on it. And you know, suddenly not having a purpose can make us feel a little bit lost as well, you know, it's so in line with what gives us meaning is our purpose, you know.
No, so true. Very conscious of time. So I'd hate to want to send the audience into monotony. We want to give them the meaning. So what takeaway are we going to give everybody to close this evening with? Go on, Dan. What's one thing?
for me, I mean, Mark has almost rounded out rather nicely there.
Yeah,
and you know, life is a journey of growth and evolution, which is what I've concluded so far on my journey of growth and evolution. Now, that growth and evolution needs a purpose in order for us to extract joy and all those lovely emotional values we're looking for: contentment, satisfaction, peace of mind. That's you know, they're kind of universal things that we're all trying to get. And that comes from having purpose. Now, purpose, you're only aware of if you know what you value. That's what gives you your purpose. We're often waiting to be told what our purpose is and to have this thing we can hold on to, going, I know my purpose now. And it will change and evolve with time. And the same as what you value, change and evolves with time. So just spend some time, get some help if you can, or just spend some time journaling, or have a look online and see ways you could do this. Self-reflection, understanding what you value, what you really care about. Look at the hardships you've gone through in your life and see how they've shaped you, what opportunities they created. Like Mark was saying earlier, the gift, what was the gift in what happened to you? And you can look back now 10 years, 5 years after those things have happened to you. Search, have a look. What was it that you took away from that changed you forever and made you understand what you cared about and why you cared about it? Because that's the key. And you're not going to find that out there. The only place you can find that is in here.
Beautifully put,
100%.
Dan. And it's that lovely big journey of life that gives us that sense of meaning and purpose as we go through it. And I'm not gonna I want to bring it down to a micro level, right? Instead of, because that's the beautiful overview of where we can go. And for people who are struggling right now, and I see Carla's on, he wants to know about the cat, right? But you will have to come back to the next one, Carla, to talk about the cat. But you know, for someone who's there wondering, where is my life got meaning and purpose? Where is it right now? Look at your day. Look at all the things you've done in your day. What was one thing in your day that felt a bit different than anything else? Was there anything in it at all? And if there wasn't, well, what is something you'd simply like to do? Something for yourself that would have something for you, that would add a little bit of value for you yourself and where you are right now. Start at the little places, because we need to find ourselves in all of this. Because if we don't know ourselves and don't have ourselves, and Ryan put a note up there, but the biggest and hardest thing to do is stop and look at yourself. Yes, it is. It's like recording yourself on video and then having to watch it back. Is that what I sound like? Oh God, that's what I sound like. Yes, it is excruciatingly painful. But once you do it and you accept it, you accept who you are, then you can work with it. Then you can change it. Then you can fix it. Then you can do it. Because you have to go through. Nothing worth having doesn't mean pain at the start. We have to go through the hard to get to the good. That's the truth of life as well. We have to get to the hard to get to the good.
No, 100%. Well, I think we should love and leave everybody this evening so that they can get on with their evenings. But no doubt we will be back next month. I am very sure of that. You can't keep us away. We might have our band name by then, but who knows?
Excellent. Thanks all.
Have a great evening, everyone. Bye.